Hello, everyone. My name is Brant Norton. This is my friend and colleague, Jason Crail. We were very nicely asked by one of your teachers, Sarah, to do a video for you guys about addiction. At one point, we were young teenagers, just like yourself. Believe it or not, we're old now, but doesn't mean that we don't know what it's like to be your age. We've been there. We know how hard it is getting through middle school, high school. It's a struggle, and there's a lot that happens during those ages, and there's many different paths that we can take. So, part of my path was, what we're gonna do is talk about a little bit about how we ended up getting addicted to drugs, how we recovered, and what it's like for us now, and then answer any questions. I can tell you right now, just to give you a little background of who I am. Right now, I actually own and operate my own outpatient drug and alcohol treatment center. It's called Pennsylvania Recovery Center. It's located in Phoenixville. And at one point, I was hopelessly addicted to heroin and alcohol and any drug you can think of that you can name. I was addicted to it. I remember at the age of 22 years old, running around the streets of Philadelphia, pretty much homeless, abandoned by my family, had really no hope at all in my life. Literally was just living, existing really to get to the next drug, to get that next feeling. It wasn't always like that. Growing up, I had a very nice home. I'm from Media, Pennsylvania originally. Grew up in Delaware County, very nice neighborhood, nice family. But I had this uncomfortable feeling that I like to talk about, especially to younger people, because I feel like everyone can kind of relate to it, where I just didn't feel like I fit in my own house or in school or anywhere really. I remember waking up at like 5, 6 years old and like sneaking down the stairs, like peeking around, being like, and just had this feeling, this natural feeling of guilt. And what I really think of it was today was just undiagnosed depression, anxiety, mental health. For some reason I was afraid. I was afraid to live life, and there was no reason really for that, for me to be that way in my own home. Right? It just didn't make any sense. But that's how I felt, and I didn't really know how to talk about it. I didn't know who to talk to. But I did know that around my family, I saw them drinking alcohol a lot. My family was great, don't get me wrong. I don't blame my family at all for what happened to me. They definitely did the best they possibly could and gave me an awesome life and the best opportunities. I have three brothers and sisters who aren't addicted to drugs, never became addicted to drugs, never had a problem with drugs and alcohol. So I can't blame my family or my upbringing. But my aunts and uncles and everything at family gatherings, they all used to drink, and they seemed really happy. And there I was, like a shell, like totally closed off, like wasn't able to even talk to anyone, my own family members. And I saw them drinking, I saw them socializing, and I thought, hey, maybe that's what I need to do. I don't know if that's really when the seed was planted, but that's how it felt at the time. My grandfather, he was a raging alcoholic. No one really talked about it. He actually died from cirrhosis of the liver. He literally bled out from drinking so much alcohol. And we even joked about it, even though it's not funny at all. But at the time, that's how we dealt with it. We said he should be buried with this cup in his hand. He always had the same whiskey cup. We said he should be buried with it. That was a little family joke, but that was just our way to deal with it, I guess. Not the healthiest way, but everyone deals with things differently. So I watched my grandfather drink himself to death, and I thought that's just how people die. I didn't really think that was abnormal or anything like that, because that was the environment that I was raised in. And finally, getting a little older, 12, 13 years old, still had that uncomfortable feeling. Like I was afraid to call my own friends to hang out with me or do something. Like unless they called me, I wasn't calling them. And I remember Halloween night, of course, the infamous night that I had my first drunk. I had tried beer and stuff when I was younger, but like sips here and there, nothing crazy. I finally got my first drunk I drank a vodka and orange juice, what we call screwdriver, and it was like I had an epiphany. It was like life finally made sense. Like there was fireworks, like things just instantly came together. I could talk to my friends. I felt confident. I was happy. I could talk to girls. I could make all these relationships. I didn't feel as uncomfortable in my skin as I did when I was sober. And that became like my aha moment where I realized that, this is really going to help me. This is going to help change my life. Obviously at that age, our brains aren't as developed. They actually say like once you start using drugs and alcohol, that's when you stop growing. So if anyone's using, so I hate to tell you, like you gotta put a stop to it because it's just gonna get worse if you're like me. And that's really what my goal here today is, and with Jay, is to share our stories with you, share some of our pain with you, and hopefully you might see your story and our story, your pain and our pain, and you'll make a decision today that, that's not the life you want to live or the direction that you want to go. But it just slowly progressed. It didn't happen overnight. I remember being in ninth grade, taking shots of whiskey before school, making pot brownies with my friends, doing all kinds of stuff. And, I didn't really think it was a big problem. But now that I look back on it now, I see my 13-year-old cousins, and I'm like, I can't believe that I thought that was a good idea at that age. And my family had no real clue. They didn't know that I was doing these things. They would find out later on, but during while it was happening, it just kind of went over their heads, I guess. Or they finally saw me socializing and thought, oh, he's figured it out. And I did, but it was in the wrong way. So I remember it just progressed throughout high school. Like I was, I remember stopping all sports. Like I was on the track team, like had high honors, all that stuff. And this became the central focus of my life because it became the solution to the problem that I had. I stopped everything. And my only thing that mattered to me was how I was going to get drunk and high every weekend or every day almost. But I'd still managed to graduate high school. I dabbled in other things like cocaine, various different pills, anything seriously that you can name it. I'd go to concerts with my friends, and our idea of a good time wasn't going to the dances and playing sports. It was going in the woods and drinking together and having a bonfire. And I'm not going to sit here and knock that or anything. Like, I'll be honest with you, I had some really good times with my friends, but eventually the fun just stopped. I remember getting to college, and finally I was like unleashed on the world. I didn't have my parents over me, so I could kind of do what I wanted. I ended up started drinking every day, partying every single day. And this was a critical time in my life. Like I was still passing, but then I wasn't. I would flip flop between semesters of passing and failing, so it started to get a little unmanageable. Didn't really know what my purpose was in life. Had no direction at all. And during this time period, it was a really sad time. My father actually got diagnosed with lung cancer. And I say it as like a metaphor, an analogy, like he got sicker and so did I. Obviously he didn't get to pick whether, he had that cancer. It kind of just showed up out of nowhere. He wasn't a smoker, but it was so devastating for me and my family that as far as my addiction goes, like if I was maybe borderline an addicted person to alcohol or drugs, that's when I just jumped off the cliff. I swan dived off of it. And I said, this is what I need to do to deal with my pain, my problems, my trauma, my depression, my anxiety, whatever. I said, this is who I am. This is what I have to do. And I used to be real judgmental of people who had problems, go figure. I would look at people who did drugs, even though I was drinking every day. They always say you point the finger and you got three pointing back at you. In my case, I was holding a bottle of liquor, pointing at all these people that did drugs and kind of looking down on them. And I'd say, I'll never get addicted to that. I just drink a lot. But lo and behold, I got introduced to, a very powerful substance known as OxyContin and other opiates. That progressed, ended up using heroin. I started out just snorting it. And finally, at the age of 20, I was injecting it on a daily basis, and it kind of took over my entire life. Like I ate, slept, and breathed heroin. And to kind of give you something to compare it to, because a lot of people don't understand, they don't know why. It's so hard to quit. It's not as simple as, hey, I'm just going to stop using it. Imagine someone taking away your ability to breathe. Imagine somebody taking away your ability to eat or drink water. That's how strong heroin addiction and other addictions are. They become an instinct to survive. And there's absolutely nothing on this earth that was going to get in between my heroin use and, to stop it. There was nothing at all. My family couldn't do it. I couldn't do it on my own. I was hopelessly addicted. Money wasn't going to do it. I had jobs and made money, and I gave it all away. I gave away the love and admiration of my family, my friends, all these relationships. I gave them away because of my addiction. They were not enough. Just a desire to stop doing it wasn't enough. And this whole time, like, my family kind of, they still didn't realize the gravity of it. They thought they wanted to look the other way, because it's something that's really hard to do. It's hard to confront a loved one and say, hey, like, you got this going on. Like, people are non-confrontational by nature. We don't want to do that. But in this case, my life was on the line. It all came to a head for me on a trip to Brazil. My sister-in-law is Brazilian. By this time, my father had passed away. I didn't even stick around for that. I had a bundle of heroin waiting in my mailbox the night he died, and I ran to that because that was my only coping skill. We went on this trip to Brazil. It didn't even cross my mind that breaking international law was a big deal, so of course I brought my substances with me. And like a good addict, I ran out halfway through the trip. So there I am on a beautiful beach, white sandy beach, beautiful clear blue ocean, sun shining, Brazil, so beautiful women all around me. And there I am laying on the ground in absolute paradise, but on the inside, I'm absolutely dying inside. I'm withdrawing on this beach, sweating, in absolute mental and physical pain. And that's when my family found out. And my mom also pulled up her credit card statement and realized that I had drained the entire bank account. So they ended up, luckily, my family, they didn't give up on me. Even though it's hard to help someone who does these things, the symptoms of an addiction are pretty ugly. My family, when we got back, they offered to get me help. I tried, and this is when I started to go to rehabs, institutions, crazy houses, and really, made my first attempt at recovery. And I'll tell you, if I went to this outpatient, and you could have had me take a lie detector test. And I wanted to get sober. I wanted to put these drugs and alcohol aside. But it was so powerful that I could not do it. I remember going to the outpatient. They're drug testing me. They're holding me accountable. They're doing therapy with me, but I still kept using. At that point, I got kicked out of my family's house. I went to an inpatient rehab. And just to give you another idea of how strong this stuff is, I did well in the inpatient, 30 days. Was like the president of the rehab. They have like alumni, like president type situation in rehab, where you can, you're like a peer mentor. And, I said to myself, I'm good. I know how to stop using. The day I got out, I picked up again. Another month and a half run. And I ended up back finally in my mom's kitchen. I didn't really have an option. Her eyes were bugging out of her head. She was so angry. Like, never seen anything like that before in my life. My family was just totally distraught. And I finally said the most honest prayer I ever said in my life. I said, I need help. And this time, for some reason, it was different. And I meant it. And luckily, they helped me. They got me in the car. They took me to a detox and a rehab. And, I went through a lot of pain. I always say, and it's part of my favorite quotes in a big book of recovery that we study, is that pain is the price of admission to a new life. So, it's not going to be easy, this recovery thing. I knew that, but I knew that I was going to have to make some serious sacrifices. And one of the things early on that I did was detoxing in this facility. and I raised my hand and I finally told the truth on myself. I said, I need help, of course. I got that humility. I became humble and finally decided that I didn't know what I was doing and that I needed to listen to the professionals, the people before me. I remember being in a group and raising my hand and saying, I feel like getting high. And this counselor, he spoke right to my heart. It's a soul sickness, and we need people to speak that language of the heart to us. And he said, Brant, you're fighting addiction. You might as well fight a brick wall. And I said, well, thanks. I guess I'm screwed, right? And he said, no, you're not. That's your problem. You keep fighting it. It's like you keep getting in the ring with addiction, and you're never going to win. It's like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. There's no possible way a guy like me is going to beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match. But that's the same thing that I was doing with my addiction. He said, I might as well fight a brick wall. And he was right. So what he told me was, sorry, a little pop-up happened there. What he told me is that I needed to finally give myself a chance. And by doing that, I had to stop fighting. That was it. If I never got into the ring, I could never lose. And I said, all right. And upon a foundation of willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty, I finally was able to listen to him. And he said, go over there. There's a 12-step meeting going on. He said, do whatever they tell you to do. And that's what I did. My insurance cut out after 13 days. I said, what do I do next? Well, they said, you can go home. I wasn't welcome there. You can go to Philly. Nope, that's where I used to cop. They said, or you can go to an extended care program in Florida. Because, this was 10 years of using. It wasn't going to be cured in 30 days. So after making the decision I needed to be out of the area for a while, they ended up sending me down to a place in Florida. Did another 30 days in an extended care program in Florida. And again, I raised my hand and said, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me what to do. They said, go to a recovery house. So these guys came in an H&I meeting, which stands for hospitals and institutions. They were bringing the meeting into the rehab, and they recommended a place. And I didn't even know any of them from a can of paint, but I kept following that foundation of willingness. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I went to a recovery house and ended up getting involved in a 12-step program where it's required to get a sponsor, home group, and start working the 12 steps. And over a period of time, something miraculous happened. My life started to get better. I was able to hold a job. I had 22 jobs in 10 years. And in my addiction, I've had like 3 or 4 in the past 10 years. So life just started gradually getting better. And over a period of time, one day I woke up and the desire to use drugs and alcohol completely left me. It was totally gone. Nobody was going to convince me otherwise. I started to pray. I started to meditate. I started to, make self-sacrifices to other people, not thinking about myself all the time, trying to help others. And my life slowly started to change. It was definitely a long road. Like the first year of sobriety, it was like learning how to walk. It was not easy. It took a lot of guts and a lot of pain. Like I said earlier, I took the bus everywhere. I really just tried to change everything because that's what needed to change. Let's be honest, at the end of the day, because the way I was living my life was not working. And since I've been in recovery, it's been over 10 years now. My life has just gotten astronomically better. I went from homeless to a homeowner. I've owned multiple homes. I've had really crazy good jobs. My family came back into my life. I've had stable relationships with women. My bank account isn't getting drained, of course. But most importantly, my favorite part is I have peace of mind today. I don't feel the need to wake up every day and be a slave to drugs and alcohol. My life just keeps getting better. So that's why I stick to what I'm doing, because I know that it's working. I know that it didn't come from me. It came from a higher power. It came from God. And it's not my job to figure anything out. It's my job to just keep doing what I've been doing and helping other people, which is why we're doing this video for y'all. If any of you heard anything that maybe sounded a little bit like you, I would say challenge yourself. Reach out. If you were like me growing up, where you just felt alone and isolated and depressed and anxious, that's okay. Where you're at right now is okay. There is a light at the other end of the tunnel. You can come out of it, but you're not going to if you don't reach out. Stick your hand up. talk to a counselor, talk to a friend, talk to your parents, talk to me or Jay, whoever, and say, I need help. And that's all you have to do. And the process will begin. And I promise you, you will not regret the changes that happen in your life. It's been a miraculous experience. That's about it for my story. I want to thank you guys for listening. I'm going to turn it over to Jay, who's going to tell a little bit about his story. He's an amazing speaker. And then we're going to answer some of your questions. So I'll turn it over to Jay now.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Pastor Jay Crail. I'm a pastor up the street from where Brant lives in Media, Pennsylvania. And it's quite interesting. He has a dialogue box that popped up on the screen, and it's cutting his head off. So he seems like a headless body talking about recovery. It's quite interesting. But I am a pastor who's been in long-term recovery for quite some time now. And don't let that word pastor fool you. I'm also a convicted felon twice over. I dropped out of high school at an early age. And I know a lot of you might be watching this graduating and you can't go down and do your ceremony. I'm graduating college as well. And I know it can hurt a little bit, but just know that I'm praying for you, and congratulations on graduating. And just remember, you can be and do anything you want to do. Anything you want to do. It depends on how bad you actually want to do it. I almost lost my life. Matter of fact, I did lose my life 3 times. And I was resuscitated from the result of shooting heroin and coming back to life before Narcan came out. Now they have this drug reversal called Narcan where they hit you with it and you come right back. But at the time that I overdosed and died, they didn't have that. So I was actually mouth-to-mouth resuscitated by 3 different nurses in 3 different hospitals in North Philadelphia. And every time that they woke me up, I used to think to myself, why did you wake me up to this miserable existence? And you fast forward and what recovery has done for my life, I look back on it now and shudder to think that I almost missed this thing. And I can't, Brant knows I have a wife, I have 2 kids and all this good stuff that recovery has brought for me. But what he talked about is absolutely true. Today, I actually have peace in the stream of life because he talked about this thing called the obsession. We have this obsession to do drugs and alcohol. So like when I was growing up, our stories are vastly different. I grew up in a very broken home. I have a father who ended up passing away as a result of this disease. He was a heroin addict and also an alcoholic who, for many, many years, his liver shut down. I was actually sober when he passed. He shut down, or he died a few years ago after his liver shut down. I grew up in like a turbulent home. I didn't have that, those mentors in my life and things of that nature. I didn't have that peace at my house that a lot of kids have. So I grew up a very disturbed kid. But I want to kind of like draw attention to the fact that we're both sitting here and our stories are very similar. Although the experience was different, the way that drugs and alcohol affected Brant and I was exactly the same. Because for the longest time, I used to blame my addiction and my alcoholism because it didn't matter what it was. Obviously, heroin was my first drug of choice, but I'll drink a 5th until I black out. That's just the kind of, I was never good with just one. I always needed everything. I needed more. So I continued to chase more and I could never get to where I wanted to be. Ever. But and the miracle is not that we're not doing drugs. The miracle is that we don't actually think about doing drugs, because that was the hardest part. Was we're suffering from a disease that centers in our mind, and the same brain that created the disease can't cure itself. It's got to come from something different, out from outside of ourselves. And so I didn't even know what that meant. I used to blame my alcoholism and my addiction on my family, or I felt like I was dealt a bad hand for the longest time. Oh, it's because I have a heroin addict father. It's because all my brothers been incarcerated. It's because I was to the youth study center. It's because my mom didn't love me the way that I needed to be loved. And I'm not trying to minimize the trauma that happened to me, because I do see a therapist as well, a pastoral therapist. He says I talk too fast. I says, well, he charges by the hour, so I got to get things out, But I still see a pastoral therapist, so I don't want to minimize anything that you're going through. But it's not done yet, and that's for all of you. It's not done yet. Your story is not done yet. It's just beginning. Do not play it small. You playing it small is not going to fit anybody. It's not going to serve anybody. It's not going to serve the world. So I hope that you dream big, and matter of fact, execute those dreams. Get that dream in your mind and just chase that thing. Don't let nothing stand in the way. See, and that's how I got sober. I knew that God had intervened in my life in a miraculous way, because up until that point, I couldn't stop. Like Brant said, I grew up the first time I ever took an opiate was when I was about 13 years old. My father gave me a Percocet 10. I grew up with 2 older brothers and we're all street guys. I grew up in, originally from Pottstown, but I lived in North Philadelphia primarily 16 years, something like that. I dropped out of high school my first week of ninth grade. I felt like I needed to go make money and chase things on the street. And the only time, every time I continued to chase those wrong things, it left me broken. And he might have came from a different background than me. And what was the difference? Materials. There's many forms of bankruptcy. The spiritual bankruptcy that we feel, as addicts and former addicts, we know the pit of despair that alcohol and drugs can bring. It's a terrible, lonely thing to go through. And I used to do it alone. And at least I thought so. But we know that we can't recover by ourselves. And that's why when he asked me to come here and speak to you guys, I took the opportunity because I was a youth pastor for multiple years before I became a pastor up the street from here. And I know what you guys are going through. You know what I mean? Like, I know the problems that teenagers face. A lot of times we do different things to fit in and all that stuff. And other people might be able to drink a little bit here and there. But if you have anything that me and Brand have and you put something in your body, you can't, continue without developing more. I want more. And that's the scary thing. We don't know. Because there is something that differentiates the other people. And there's no way of telling. So just be careful in everything that you do. And if you are struggling, make sure that you reach out for help. I never really wanted to reach out for help. I was just a scared little boy that missed some hugs from his dad. And for the longest time, I thought I was some super tough guy. You know what I mean? I would lash out at anybody who got closer to me. Anybody who ever tried to help me, I pushed them away. Brand's story, he went through treatment. I went through treatment as well. But the problem with me is if you don't lock me up, I'm going to find a way out. I'm like the gingerbread man. Catch me if you can out here. That's just how I was. I ran, it's how I was. I ran from everything in my life because I was deathly afraid that I would be found out. But really, I was just desperately needing help that I didn't know was available. So when my father, I was taken from him at the age of 13, 14 years old like that. And I know sometimes when I share my story, I got to share that so you guys can relate to the things that I was going through because my house was a very violent home. The state of Pennsylvania stepped in. Police were called to my house multiple times because of the violence that my mother and my brothers were suffering. And that's not. I don't like to talk bad about anything anymore because when you know what you are, you know what you're not. And I'm above all that nowadays. You know what I mean? But I still want to say that so you can relate. Like I grew up in a very broken home, and I didn't think that there was anybody there that was willing to help me. But I never really spoke out and even asked for help. So I dropped out of school, multiple things that I could talk about and go on for days to tell you about. But I'll just fast forward to the time that I got sober because if you want to hear about my life before God intervened in it, it's a terrible picture of how one should live their lives. It's a terrible picture. You don't want that. You don't want that experience. Trust me, it's a bad one. I lived it. I don't want to have to do that anymore. The only time I bring it up is so you can relate because our past does not define us. Matter of fact, my past is actually gold today. It allows me to sit here and tell you that you don't have to go through the same thing that I went through. You don't have to. All you got to do is ask for help. That could be from your family members. It could be from some of your peers. It could be from your mental health department, from your schools. It could be from anybody. But help is available. It really is. You just got to open up. And so you fast forward June the 11th of 2011. I woke up like any other day. Homeless in an abandoned house in North Philadelphia, Kensington section, where the opiate epidemic, that's like the hub right now in America. It's pretty bad. But I lived up the street from there for the longest time. So like my family was living right up on F Street and I was right at C Street. And I was sleeping in an abandoned house. I was there for 2 years, matter of fact, at this point in my career, quote unquote, of drug use. And I woke up in this abandoned house the same way I had for the past 2 years, a complete shell of a human being. I wouldn't even call me a man because I definitely wasn't, but I was completely broken. Any relationship that I touched in my life, I hurt, I crushed, I devastated. My mom, who was the only proponent in my life who loved me for me, tried to do everything she could do to provide a better life for me. And you want to know how I repaid her? I robbed her. That's how strong this obsession is to heroin and alcohol. I robbed her. And I didn't want to. There would be tears in my eyes while I'm walking down my mom's hallway, ready to rob her jewelry box, not wanting to. She's the only person who ever stood by me through all this stuff. And I don't want to do it anymore. I didn't realize that I didn't have the power to not do it. That's how strong this mental obsession is. I pray that none of you ever get this. Because there's a lot of people who lost their lives as a result of it. There's a lot of people who would die to be in the position that I'm in right now in the hospital, begging God for the opportunity that I have. And I don't squander that, and I don't ever want to waste this opportunity that's been given to me, because I know what it's like to rob my mom. Sleep, pride, possessions, you name it. She married my stepdad, a Vietnam War veteran, an amazing man. You want to know? He tried to be the father to me that I never had. You want to know how you want to know how I repaid him? I robbed him. And I didn't want to. So that ship sailed a long time ago. So when I woke up in this abandoned house, and I'm not talking about couch surfing. I'm talking about jumping in the dumpsters and eating out of the garbage pails. That's the kind of person that I was. I was a convicted felon twice already. And to be transparent, I really was hoping that the next bag of heroin would kill me, because I didn't want to live in this miserable existence anymore. I didn't want to be like this. I didn't know how not to be. And while I was sitting in this abandoned house, something came over me to call home to my mom. And I was running with this guy, I'll never forget. He had a Nokia cell phone. I'm dating myself a little bit. He said we're older, man. Listen, he can speak for himself. I look like I'm 20, you know what I mean? But nah, so they got right. I just got a little haircut during the quarantine, COVID-19. But so I woke up in this abandoned house and I asked this guy to use his cell phone, and I got the cell phone, and for whatever reason, I wanted to hear a familiar voice on the other end. So I called home to my mom, who I haven't seen in 2 years. The constables were always coming to her house to put me back in prison, and I haven't spoken to her. So I called home that eventful day. I didn't choose that day to get sober. I believe that God chose me that day to get sober. And I get emotional every time I think about it and talk about it, because in God's garden of grace, a broken tree can bear fruit. And I was definitely a broken tree, and I definitely needed to bear fruit. And I think my pain and all the devastation that I caused, and that was internalized too, I was a blank slate for the God that I serve. In my desperation, God saw a blank canvas, because I wasn't too tough or too afraid to ask for help. Because any given moment I could be too tough, and the other moment I could be too afraid. So I called home that eventful day, and my stepfather answered the phone. I love this man, Vietnam War veteran. I robbed him so many times. I walked some dark paths in my addiction and alcoholism, but when Jim was in my life, I guarantee you that I never walked alone. And he talked to my mom, and he says, hey, your youngest son's on the phone. And she says, I don't want to speak to him. I'm prepared to bury him. And I'll tell you that I don't think that was the first time that she ever said it, but it was the first time that I felt it. At a time when love was the only thing that mattered, and I knew nothing else really mattered at all. I asked God for help. My stepfather shifted the course of my life forever with these 3 words. He said, listen, I know I'm not your dad, but I sure as heck do love you like I am. And then he said these magical words. And those 3 words, I hope that you guys get to hear them more than not. I love you. And that was the first time another man ever told me that he loved me. And I asked God for help right there in an abandoned house. And I got it. I had this out-of-body experience, and I felt like at a time when my life felt like it was going to be over, I had this amazing experience, and I felt in my heart that it was actually finally just beginning. And I turned myself into the correctional facility for the 5th time in 4 years, ready to do a 2-year jail sentence. I could do those. That's not terrible for me. I can do that. I'm very good at that. But I didn't know how to live life successfully outside of a place like that. I just didn't know how to live life like a normal person. I always thought that I was confined to jails, institutions, and death. I felt all 3. And so I turned myself into the jail that served the best food. That's a little running joke. I was sober at the time. So I turned myself into the place that served the best food. And this is how I became a pastor. I looked down at the edge of the bench in quarantine, sick as ever. I felt like I was dying, and there was a Bible sitting there, and I opened it up, and the first verse that I saw was Isaiah 41:10. It said, fear not, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I'll strengthen you, uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I felt like, and I grew up with no spiritual upbringing. How does this convicted felon twice over ever become a pastor in the community? Well, it was by divine intervention, and God entered in my life in a miraculous way. And now I get to serve my community. I as well work with people that are in the recovery community. I'm married to my wife, Barbie, and she's an amazing woman. I got 2 beautiful kids. I mean, every dream that I've ever had in recovery, I have executed on a daily. I get to, lead the community. I get to lead my family. I get to lead my church members. And the only thing I have to do is follow. You know what I mean? Like, the most gifted people are the ones that learn how to serve other people. The most happy, joyous, and free people are the ones that learn how to serve. and that's a fact. And I'm glad that I found my truth in helping the community and serving other people in this capacity, especially, when the alcoholic or an addict comes before me, which is daily, by the way. You see the numbers rising to alcoholism and overdose rates. It's pretty scary stuff, but I'm here to tell you that I see people liberated from this every week, and that's the joy that I get. I don't care if you believe in God or you just believe in good. Just remember that Pastor Jay believes in you. I believe in you. I believe in the cause that whatever you're going through, like Brent was talking about. It really does start with those 3 words: I need help. You know what I mean? Like that's all you really have to do, because when you ask for help, you will receive it. I could go on and on about all the things that I have been blessed with as a result of recovery, but the greatest thing is that I don't want to wake up and shoot heroin and drink anymore. Because after that, everything else is just a bonus. Anytime I open my eyes and not want to destroy myself is the miracle. But anything after is just a bonus for a guy like me. I'm truly grateful to be here, and I want to get into some of your questions, Brian, because I know we don't want to go past the time that we have.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
Yeah,
I really
absolutely.
appreciate you sharing your message. And just to reiterate, you're looking at 2 guys that should absolutely be dead.
Amen.
We were 100% felt hopeless at one point, but due to the power of God and recovery, we were able to get out of that. So I just want to reiterate that no matter what you're feeling or thinking right now, there is hope, and we're willing to help. I mean, that's my purpose today, is just to help as many people as I can before I die. But we wanted to answer some of your questions. We got about 14 pages worth. I appreciate all the interest and everything. We're not going to be able to answer them all, so we just picked 10. And then hopefully our stories kind of answered anything. But obviously, maybe you guys can get our contact information if you want to reach out to us directly. So the first question that we picked was, is it possible for someone to quit drugs cold turkey?
Good luck. You can, absolutely. Good luck. I've done it on a prison cell in quarantine. You don't want to do that. Trust me. You'd rather be in a safe, medically stable facility who's being medically ran by staff to make sure that you are going through the proper protocol, because there is detox protocol. It can be dangerous, number one, and it's painful, number 2. No matter, alcohol is deadly. Benzos, which is like Xanax and that can kill you. You can seizure up and you can die. But even heroin, it's terrible. You don't want to do that route. You can do that route, and I've had the opportunity to see people do it, few and far between. A lot of times, at least in my experience, Brain, is that people that quit cold turkey eventually go back because they're not really necessarily working on the things that matter, like that mental obsession that I was talking about. Right. You're only dealing with the physical part, and that's great, and that's good stuff. Of course it is, but also you're not really actually diving into the other 3 components of this disease.
I agree. Just quitting the drugs is not enough. It is. I was never personally able to do it. I had to go to a facility, and that's what I needed to do. But that's just the beginning. It's like getting physically sober is like putting a Band-Aid on something. It's not going to heal whatever is going on in your life, and you need to take further steps in order to fully recover. All right. Next question was, even when you are sober, do you still feel like you need whatever you were addicted to?
No. Nope. I can honestly say in almost 9 years that I've been sober, I haven't thought about drinks or drugs once. And that's because I stay in fit spiritual condition and I help other people. And I really work on my recovery before anything else. I mean, without working on your recovery, it's not going to probably work for you, especially if you're an alcoholic of my type of variety. But nah, not at all. I mean, I of course, a lot of my family lives in North Philadelphia, so my nephew, he goes to school down there, so I'm down there a lot, and that's where I used to rip and run. And so when I'm driving by a drug block, of course I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do this. But honestly, it's supplanted with the old thought, or the new thought of wow, I thank God that I'm not doing those things anymore. My life has been radically changed, radically transformed, and sanity has returned. I don't think about that kind of stuff. The only thing I think about is man, who can I help down there? So that's where my mind is now.
Right, I agree. I mean, I love being sober. You can't buy this feeling. It's helping other people. It doesn't exist in a store, in a bar. It's from a guy on the street corner. It's the best possible feeling in the world to be physically sober, spiritually, mentally healthy, and just wanting to do better for yourself and for your community. So the thought just never even crosses my mind either. Not saying it can't. I definitely am just as susceptible as anyone else, but the fact that I'm I'm still willing to do the things I need to do on a daily basis to stay sober is what keeps me that way. And the next question is, what advice would you give teens about drug addiction?
I mean, that's a good question. Number one, don't do it. But I'm a realistic kind of guy. I mean, it's going to be hard for people just not to do it, right? Like, number one, don't do it. Never in a million years did I ever think that I'd be homeless eating out of a dumpster. Like, it's just a fact. I never thought that I was going to become that. Now, there's no way of telling. But I mean, what is addiction going to bring to your life? I mean, really, I mean, you're never going to be able to amount to nothing. You're not going to be able to accomplish nothing. So that's why, like, even when I started a little bit, I talk about having these dreams and these hopes and these visions of what you want your life to look like and go and get it. You know, I never had that kind of motivation in my life. I mean, we all have choices in life, the right thing and the wrong thing. You can choose the wrong thing, but you better be prepared for the consequences that come with it. I always was until they started getting greater and greater. You know, and now looking back on it, I wish I'd never, I mean, mine came a little differently because it was in my family and everything, but there's no excuse. My mother told me what was right from wrong, but I still chose the wrong thing. You know what I mean? So when you choose the wrong thing, bad things happen. And that's just a fact of life in general. You can use that with addiction. You can use that with anything in life. It depends on what you want out of life. Do you want to be a drug addict? Really? I don't think you do.
No. How long did it take for the craving part to end?
See, mine was a radical transformation. I was sick for like a week while I was incarcerated. I didn't really have this obsession to use because I couldn't go down the block and get anything, you know. But mine was changed. But after working with a lot of alcoholics and you know, people who I like to say substance use disorder, by the way. I don't like to say addicts too much, but people that suffer, because it is a disease, by the way. It's a disease. But you know, so an alcoholic or anyone suffering from substance use disorder, I would say, when they start helping other people. And it's just something to be said about that, where it's like like cleaning up your life too, where it's like, you know, you go through this process, and it's like you usually, alcoholism and addiction, like, tear the families up, whatever that looks like for the certain person. But the minute you start to like say, like, hey, I did this to you and it was wrong, and how do I make this right? That's when you start to see, because you're not really jammed up and focused on yourself anymore. When your life is all about you, your life isn't as good as it can be, whether you're an alcoholic or not. When your life is all about you, when you're consumed with yourself, it's not going to be as good as it can be if you're thinking about other people's needs and working for those. That's been my experience. Everything I have is a direct result of me trying to help somebody else. And the greatest thing is that peace that, like Brand was talking about. But that does come in the process when you start to rebuild your life.
Yeah, for me, you know, I had, like I said in my story, I made multiple attempts at recovery, but finally, what was different for me was just actually listening to what people were saying, like just finally understanding and recognizing that I didn't have the answer to my problem anymore, and whatever I'm doing is not working. And after just taking the suggestions and actually applying them, one day I just woke up and the desire was gone, like it was completely lifted. The problem was removed, and I could focus on what I needed to do next, which was to continue to stay sober and help other people. So why do only some people get addicted to drugs?
I say it's because of the disease, right? It doesn't. Some people, it says we see people taking drinks with impunity, which means without consequences. A lot of times we'll see people that go to bars and stuff like that. They have a couple beers after a game or a hard day at work, and they have a beer at a game or something. But it's not necessarily so with the person who suffers from substance use disorder. One is just the one to get to the next one. Like, that's just how we are. So I really do feel, I know there's a part in here, I think, that we talked about with families and everything. I don't know if we chose that one, but I really do feel like that genetics do play some things involved in this, but it's absolutely a disease. Not everybody's going to get the disease, but those that do suffer, and they suffer badly as a result of this disease.
Right. You know, like I said in my story, like I had a great family, my nuclear family, like my mom, dad, brothers, sisters, none of them got addicted to drugs. But I do agree with Jay that 100%, like, it is a disease. My favorite definition is it's a chronic relapsing brain disorder. So, I mean, think about it. This is going on in your mind. You know, you're not going to be able to just, you know, fight it off, you know, by sheer willpower, you know, if it's that deep. And, some people they don't have the same reaction. It says a lot in the literature of the fellowship we both engage in that our bodies as addicts and alcoholics are bodily and mentally different than our fellows. So it might be just luck of the draw, like part genetic, part family, part you did it too many times and now you're addicted. I don't know. All I really care about is what you're willing to do to not be addicted anymore.
Amen.
It says, what kind of treatment did you get for your addiction?
Mine was originally detoxing in quarantine at an institution again, not a treatment center. I definitely don't recommend that, by the way. That's just been my experience. I was always good at going back to prison. But after I came home, I started a 12-step fellowship like Brant was talking about, and I started working on my spiritual condition. Different avenues for that too, by the way. Obviously, I'm a pastor. We know what I believe. I'm not really worried about that with you right now. Like, I just want to make sure that it doesn't matter really what you believe, that you can and be anything you want to be and actually overcome this disease. But I say a good treatment is, Brand owns a center. I actually work for a treatment center as well, and we do different types of, modalities to treat people, but also 12-step fellowship. You can't go wrong with that too. Definitely not.
Yeah, detox is the first step, getting physically feeling better. And then the most important part is what you do after detox. Like I said, like you're not going to just get the substances out of your body and feel like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Long-term treatment is better. The most successful people that I see are the ones that follow what's called the continuum of care. It starts with detox, then it goes to rehab, then it goes to something called partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient, and outpatient. And if you follow that continuum along with a stable, structured living environment, some people can't do it, but I do recommend a sober living facility where you're around other people and trying to get sober as well. The community aspect of it is really important. And if your family isn't sober, you should really think about that. You might need to separate yourself from them for a while until you're strong enough to be around it. We're not out here to change anybody's family or anything like that. We're just concerned with the people that do need the help and want the help, to let you know that it is possible regardless of whatever situation you're in right now. You could be around family full of alcoholics and addicts, but you'd have to separate yourself from that or you're never going to get better.
Excellent.
But why is addiction something seen so frequently but not talked about?
Yeah, I mean, it's stigma, all day stigma. People don't want to think that it's happening to their kids or it's not happening in our house. It's not happening in our town. But I at least in my opinion now, maybe because I do work in the field too, but I think that's been lifted a little bit because we start seeing that it's actually affecting everybody, all lines of walks of life. It doesn't matter who you are. Somebody who has suffered from this disease. So I think it has been lifted, but there's still a lot of stigma on it. Back in the day when I was first trying to get sober, I was looked at. I mean, I've been called a lot of things. I'll just say I've been called a lot of things. And I think it's just a stigma. Like, oh, well, look, they're less than or whatever the case may be. But it's not necessarily so. I know tons of prominent people who have suffered from this disease.
It definitely does not discriminate. Celebrities get it, lawyers get it, doctors, people that a lot of us hold in high regard, they're just as susceptible to this. And that's the biggest thing, is breaking that stigma to say, like, this disease does not discriminate. It can affect anyone, anywhere, at any time. Doesn't care how much money you have in your pocket. Doesn't care how much your family loves you. Like, it will get you and it will bring you to your knees. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. Shine a light on it. That's the only way that you're going to come out of the darkness.
Amen.
You keep it dark. You don't want to talk about it. Your family doesn't talk about it. You're going to be stuck in that cycle over and over again until we can get the courage, as an individual, then as a community, to come together and say, hey, this isn't as uncommon as you might think. Everyone somewhere probably knows someone that is addicted to drugs and alcohol, or has a family member that is, or something.
Yeah.
Next question is addiction genetic?
I mean, I have it in my family. If I had to pick, I would say yes. I think there's a lot of science that does kind of point towards that. And I would say for sure. I mean, a lot of people in my family died from this disease, not just my father, but a lot of people. And it does affect my immediate family and my distant family in a real way.
Yeah, I 100% think it's genetic. I read somewhere, I don't have the exact statistics on me, so don't quote me, that, like 70% of the cases, is through simply because it's genetic and runs in your family.
Makes sense.
And it might skip a generation or two. Not everybody might have it, but usually when we do what's called a genograph and look at the whole picture of the family, we're going to find someone somewhere that had an addiction problem. And usually that does get passed down, like other good traits that people have. Like some people are super intelligent, while there's also negative traits that get passed down too. Next question: what did your family and friends think when they found out you were using?
They weren't surprised. For me, they weren't surprised. My family was like, I really don't. They just weren't surprised, Like I was a lost kid. I was a lost kid. So like they, it wasn't like a big shock to them. And even when I was doing heroin, like at an early age, I started doing heroin when I was like 14, right around 14 years old. They weren't surprised. They're actually more surprised that I'm still alive. I think more people are surprised that I'm even a pastor now in the community. Like my mom is like, she's my best friend now, so she's like, she's more surprised that I've made it this far in life. Praise God for that. But I don't think she was surprised at all, because of the rough life that we've had before I even became, a substance use disorder person.
Yeah, my family was absolutely terrified. Like I said, I was the only one that really went through this in my immediate family, and that's part of the reason why I do this today. Like I had friends that I was using with that were scared to death of me. Like people that were also using drugs with me, saying like, "Yo, you need to stop." That's how you know you got a serious problem, when the guy next to you who is doing things with you is telling you got a problem. Like, and it's something that you need to take a look at. But that's why we're here. Like my family didn't really know where to turn. I know the struggle that my mom went through trying to get me help, and that's why we want you guys to know, and I hope some families maybe watch this too, that there is help out there. There are good people out there. Definitely. And there is a way out.
Amen.
And the last question we have is, do you still have thoughts of relapsing even after recovering?
Nope, I do not, and that's not a testament to me. That's about a testament to the God that I serve and the people that I get to help. I really think that is, for me, I found the spiritual solution to my disease, and it's been like he said. You can't put a price tag on what we've got and this inner peace that we have, because we know what it's like to have these desperate things. We've been in the worst of the worst that you can even think of. Just incomprehensible stuff, but. Now we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's like what our literature talks about. And I don't swear it off. Like, it's just, the problem has been removed from me. And now it's like, now I got to worry about other things like bills, like the rest of all of us, like stuff like that. But like, I really do not think about those kind of things. I know people that do. But what Brant said is so key for that. Shine a light on it. Don't let it sit in the dark. Shine a light on it, because when we do recover, we recover together. That's a staple.
Yeah, like I said, my worst day being sober doesn't even come close to my best day using. Being sober is just so much better. I know it might be hard to believe, but it's something that you have to experience. It's not something that I can give you. I wish I could make you feel the way I do, but if you are having a problem with alcohol or drugs, you do not want to miss this experience. It's an incredible experience. Your life will just get astronomically better, and your family will definitely thank you for taking the steps needed.
Yep.
So that's it. That's all the time we have, and hopefully we didn't go over too far. Just wanted to say thank you guys again for taking the time to listen, and God bless everyone.
Stay safe and healthy. God bless you.